Ooh.
Oh, you snuck up on me. Ah, gotta tighten up my fundoshi. Get ready. Here we go.
Yeah.
You too?
Yes.
What are we going to talk about today, Maya?
I didn't get that. I'm sorry, not on
No.
screen at least. Good morning, Timothy. Good morning, everybody watching us, and welcome to Japanese Politics One-on-One. When Timothy Langley, the CEO of Langley Esquire, the oldest standing government relations agency in Tokyo, walks us through the latest events in Japanese politics. So, oh, Timothy, you're still there. Oof, nice. For a moment, I thought that you ran away, as you always want to do.
I've tried to. I've never gotten away with it, though.
No, never. All right, so this is episode 268 of Japanese Politics One-on-One. Once again, Timothy is reporting from his beautiful boat, this time from a different place, I believe. And I'm somewhere in Shizuoka. Yes, for the graduation trip of my daughter. And thank you very much, Timothy, for preparing and being willing to stay there and endure. So I'll pass it over to you to let us know what we're going to hear about today.
Great. Thank you very much, Maya. And good morning, everyone. Welcome to a glorious Ohanami weekend. You might remember that last year we got rained out a little bit, Maya. Ohanami was a little bit cut short. This year it looks great. Yesterday and today, I think Mankai is today, if I'm not mistaken. And so throughout this next week, there will be lots of time to enjoy that, and then it kind of ends, probably 10 days, but. I'm here on the good ship Grimm's reporting to you once again. Not always, but almost always, because it's just nice to get out and away from Tokyo and get on the water, and not everybody's able to do that. But I can't help it. So I report from the good ship Grimm's, and there's so much to get into today. So let me get straight into it. Tuesday, Maya, is the last day of March. You're going to promo movie night, which is on Tuesday, the last Tuesday of every month. But
Yes.
Tuesday's the last day of March. March zoomed by us so quickly. I mean, it's almost unbelievable how fast it went by us. But a lot has happened, and the budget was supposed to pass by Tuesday. It's not going to. Instead, we have an 11-day provisional budget that the cabinet must pull together and then submit to get through the 11-day period. And it's been exercised as a sort of a negotiating tool, a tweak of the nose for the prime minister. She wanted it passed on time, and the upper house, who is holding it now, is kind of seeing what they can do to extract a little bit of leverage. And so, based on the Constitution, if the lower house passes it to the upper house and the upper house does not pass it, within 30 days, it goes back down to the lower house and it is passed as presented by the lower house. So it's just a little bit of drama, unnecessary. Let's see how much damage it does, political damage does to the prime minister. I don't suspect very much, but it was an exercise in diet politics. And in the diet, the currency is not what the currency is elsewhere in Japan or elsewhere in the world. It's about stability and what you say, and are you fulfilling your promise, and can we throw rocks at you legitimately because you made a mistake, or you hired somebody, or you put them in a position of power, that sort of thing. So the currency within the diet is a little bit different. So the fact that she wasn't able to meet that deadline, it is meaningful in the diet, not so much elsewhere. But at the same time, we're exactly 1 week away from her visit to Washington, D.C., an epical visit. She was able to talk about the second tranche of the $550 billion commitment that Japan has made to the United States. And it's not just Japan. I mean, other countries have done the same thing. So this commitment of Japan is combined with other countries and other trade deals to jointly process trade or manufacturing or investment, that sort of thing. Japan's commitment is $550 billion. This is the second tranche that they talked about. There are two package deals that specifically were talked about. I'd like to get into that with a little bit of detail, but how did she actually manage that visit? We've had 1 week to think about it, so we can talk about it a little bit more in detail. And meanwhile, the February tourism numbers are in. If you are in Tokyo, I mean, the greatest number of tourists come during Ohanami season. So Tokyo is flooded with it, but we have the numbers for February. February is typically a down month, but there's been a great influx of tourists in some sectors and then the diminution in others. And once again, Japan is targeted to exceed the tourism numbers on an annual basis in 2026 yet again, and we're well on the way there. I want to talk about that a little bit because tourism is a huge component. It's something that we all see and we can feel, especially if you're in Tokyo, Kyoto, maybe Osaka. You're seeing that reflected in the number of people on the streets. Energy markets remain tight, but there was a start of a nuclear reactor just this last week. And because there's so much going on in Iran, you've got to expect that North Korea is going to be saying something, and they did. Our great leader, Kim Jong-un, made a pronouncement to his government, his parliament, if you can call it that, about how much nuclear weapons are important to North Korea to deter aggression from outside forces. And he also said, and I want to make sure that everybody understands that South Korea is our number one most hostile enemy. So this is just this last week. Relatively quiet in the past maybe 2 months or so. So now this is beginning to ratchet up. You'll remember that Prime Minister Takaichi also floated a balloon maybe 3 weeks ago about how nice it would be if she could visit North Korea and talk with Kim Jong-un. His sister, who is up again and down again, but she's very prominent in foreign policy within North Korea, and she has said flatly, there is no reason for Pyongyang to welcome the Japanese prime minister. They're just going to say the same things. They're going to have the same demands. There's no reason for having that meeting. And so that's kind of fallen on deaf ears. That follows, I think, the prime minister going to Washington, D.C. One of the discussions was, can we move on North Korea? Can we, Trump visited North Korea. Can we piggyback on that? Can Japan and the United States do something together so that perhaps there is a meeting we can cool temperatures down? I'm sure that discussion was had. And similarly, there was a discussion with, when you go to China, could you help us kind of ease that situation in between, China and Japan? We've got a couple of issues, and this was before there was a self-defense forces officer who invaded the Chinese embassy right over here in Roppongi Hills, actually. He went into the embassy, he crawled over the fence, he had a knife. It's a 23-year-old officer, not just a regular grunt, but an officer. So this is kind of rattling up issues there too. So there's a lot moving at once. Please give me about 35 minutes of your time. Let me get into that. And then let's roll into the really active Q&A that's managed adroitly by Maya. Send your questions and your comments to her. Please make them as confusing as possible so that we can watch her squirm on screen. And let's get into that. That's really the meat and the bones of this briefing. But thank you very much for joining us every Sunday, 268 times consecutively. So no matter where I go, I mean, I just can't help it. I can't escape this trap that I'm in. Maya?
Right. Okay, thank you for that, Timothy. And yes, so please remember that we appreciate your input to these briefings because when you're here with us, we know that, well, there is something. It is really highly motivational for us to do things. And to help us spread the word, please help us share them with your colleagues and friends and family members, and also probably acquaintances if you think that the briefings are informative. Remember that also we have a movie night on Tuesday coming up, and please try to follow us on LinkedIn so that you know where the meeting will be on Tuesday. It will be at 6:30, but we'll disclose the time on LinkedIn, basically the venue on LinkedIn later today and tomorrow. So thank you very much for this. And Timothy, once again, it is over to you. You disappeared for a moment, and I thought that maybe you finally gained enough courage to escape, but this is not the
No,
case. Thank you.
because I understand retribution. We do politics, so I understand that sort of thing.
Right.
But let me get back into it. So we're 1 week away, Maya, from the Prime Minister visiting Washington, D.C. It gives us a little bit of time to separate the optics from the substance. And the headline remains, as far as her trip is concerned, the $550 billion investment framework. But what matters now is the execution of those promises, those trade agreements. And this week we saw the second tranche take shape. Roughly $73 billion is tied to two concrete projects. $40 billion for modular nuclear power development in Tennessee and Alabama, and $33 billion for natural gas generation in Pennsylvania and Texas. Excuse me. You might not know this, but each of the individual states has a state office in Tokyo. There are 50 states, and I think there are 50 offices. There are at least 48 offices who do trade and investment, cross-border flow back and forth. So when these trade deals are mentioned about Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia's getting a big deal as well. A lot of that is in concert with the trade office in the various states, how well the governor is interacting with the prime minister or with the president of the United States. And it really, this richness is not just about Trump and the prime minister. It's about all of the states participating there and everybody trying to build up the money that's being invested in the United States. So these aren't symbolic commitments, they're industrial anchors, and they position Japan directly inside US energy infrastructure at a moment of global supply stress. And when you combine this with the first round of investments focused on supply chains, advanced manufacturing, strategic infrastructure, you begin to see the architecture. Japan is embedding itself into the American economic core, and that is a strategic trade. So a lot of people might say, we've got the pistol to the head in the United States. They're being so rambunctious and they're being so forceful. This is, Japan could deny it or they could walk away from it. But, Tokyo has actually signaled that it will continue to abide by the existing trade and tariff arrangements, even after the United States Supreme Court suggested or said, in fact, that this was an example of executive overreach. So that's not passivity, that's discipline. They made the agreement. The Supreme Court said you can't begin to pull those tariffs in and force people to have these trade deals. Japan came back, announced when Takaichi was in Washington, D.C., that in spite of that, we're still going to fulfill our promises. So that's, when you're looking for somebody that's a stand-up partner, among all of the countries that the United States deals with, I think you can say with some degree of confidence that Japan is a stellar ally. Compared to what's going on in Europe, France, England, elsewhere in the world, Japan is somebody that continually can be relied upon. Now, it's true that the request by the prime minister, by the president, can you help us, clear the mines? Can you help us, send some destroyers to the Hormuz Straits? Yes, there are some problems there, but I think, and even there was a little bit of a mismatch in messaging between Koizumi, the defense minister, and Ms. Takaichi. He made a comment on Thursday. On Friday, she had to kind of backtrack it a little bit about the self-defense forces sending minesweepers. The Japanese are head and heels above everybody else in the world in minesweeping technology and ships that they have that are specifically designed for that task. And I think, I think what the defense minister suggested was we might be sending one minesweeper. One minesweeper is not going to do the trick, and Japan has a fleet of them. So I think it's just like Trump saying there's no boots on the ground, but now we see that there are boots on the ground. So it's just this incremental change to deal with the realities of an evolving situation. And I think Japan is trying to place itself in that position too. But anything that she says or does is going to be criticized in among the press and inside the Diet, she doesn't have firm control of the upper house, as we're experiencing already with the supplementary, with the provisional budget and passing the formal budget by Tuesday. So there's a lot that's been going on there. So the March 31st target for passing the budget is effectively gone. The Prime Minister didn't even want to propose a provisional budget because she wanted to put all of her money on the fact that she was going to get the budget through on March 31st. The realization that she couldn't do that happened last week after she came back, and the ire of the upper house. I mean, they're 4 votes short. Mr. Tamaki with the Democratic Party for the People did not weigh in. He could have weighed in. That would have put the provisional budget by the wayside. So now the Prime Minister and her cabinet, they have to crunch down, and they have to provide a budget, a provisional budget for 11 days from April 1st to April 11th. That's a lot of energy. That's a lot of just to tweak the nose, I think. I think that can be said. So Mr. Tamaki was looking for an opportunity to get some advantage or some benefit or something like that. He didn't win out, and so he threw down the gambit. And the upper house will not pass the budget as the Prime Minister wanted. So now the upper house has to accept, as well as the lower house, this provisional budget for 11 days as a stopgap. So it's the way that the Prime Minister, the executive branch, combats that kind of denial. But the Constitution says 30 days, and that's why when the Prime Minister pushed the lower house to finish it with 58 hours of debate and a target date, that was specifically to make that 30-day slot as close to April 1st as possible. So she had to push it up 58 hours. Nobody's done it in 58 hours. Mr. Abe did it in, I think, 64 hours, about 8 administrations ago. But 30 days, the Constitution says, if it's not passed in the upper house, it becomes law anyway. So that 30-day window is eclipsed on the 11th of April. So it's not a legislative defeat, in my view. The Constitution is clear. If the upper house doesn't act within 30 days, the lower house version becomes law automatically. So the budget will pass, but it's politics, not just about outcomes. It's about the optics. And the optics here, the Prime Minister set a deadline and she missed it. And that matters because she just came back from Washington needing to project control. Instead, the upper house has created delay, not to stop the budget, but just to remind the government that the upper house still matters. Pay attention to us. And although the Constitutional Democratic Party has merged with Komeito in the lower house, in the upper house, they didn't. So Mr. Tamaki's argument was, we're the largest opposition party. The Constitutional Democratic Party is small by comparison. They just have a couple of members in the upper house. We have the upper house and the lower house. Alternatively, or the new group is called the merger between the Constitutional Democratic Party and Komeito. What is it?
The Reformist Alliance.
Yes, the Reformist Alliance, which says it all right there. They only have members in the lower house, and individually they have members in the upper house. So it's a bit of a mess, and the opposition party just wants to make sure that the Prime Minister isn't taking too much advantage of the mess that they created themselves, and they're just exercising what control that they do have. It's not very meaningful, but yes, in Diet politics, in Kasumi Gaseki, in Nagatacho, it is meaningful. So let's just see how this plays out. But there are deeper structural moves underway at the same time. The long discussed reduction of approximately 45 lower house seats is not any longer theoretical. It will be prepared. It will be passed this session. The Prime Minister has said that. And of course, Ishin is relying on that. And the remaining debate is technical. It's not how many seats. It's not how many seats, but it's how many seats come from one component, the proportional representation, compared to the other component, which is the district representation. So the irony here is that the LDP, since it won so massively in just this last election, that even though the reduction affects everybody kind of equally, because the LDP is so large, that equal hit hurts them less. So their percentage goes from what they have now is, which is about 64% of the lower house, to actually go about 73%. So, be careful what you wish for, Ishin. And you got what you wanted, but as a consequence of that, the LDP got a little bit stronger. So thank you very much. The other issue that's sweet and important to Ishin no Kai is making Osaka the formal second city. And it continues to move forward. It's likely to pass, but these aren't headline issues right now, but they're structural and they reshape the political architecture quietly underneath the daily noise. So Osaka is beginning to rise up. Ishin is beginning to coalesce their, for Ishin, this is a long play. They're beginning to form a bit of cohesion. And with the controversy with the other opposition parties and this kind of merger, it's not a merger, it's not even an alliance, a formal alliance between the LDP. It is a step forward, and I think we're going to see more of that. But let's get moving on to other issues. As I talked about, the country is filling up with the numbers from February. So they run the numbers. It's March now. It's the end of March. We won't have the end of March. We won't have the March numbers until the end of April. But for February, there's, a lot of stuff going on there. The pent-up demand is pulling people in at scale. South Korea has now overtaken other markets. It's up sharply from year to year, roughly about 1.1 million visitors. Taiwan, the United States, and Hong Kong remain strong second, third, and fourth contributors. And 18 countries in February set new records for their constituents, their nationalities visiting Japan. That's in February. February is typically the lowest month. It's the coldest month. So the number of tourists coming in, but there was a record-breaking number in February. I have got to imagine that March is just going to be a blockbuster. But there are two important counter trends. First, Chinese visitors are down sharply, as you kind of might imagine, but they're almost half from what they were in February of last year. And that's not seasonal. That reflects a deeper structural and political friction. And second, the Middle East traffic, which is normally small, it's interesting. I guess when you think about it, you might notice it, but the number of visitors to Japan from the Middle East comprise less than 1% of the total. That's interesting, isn't it? The Middle East doesn't really, I guess they travel elsewhere, but they don't come to Japan. But in fact, there are the 23 flights that were scheduled to go from the Middle East to Japan this last week have all been canceled. So there's a lot going on in the Middle East, of course, but it seems that the composition of tourism is changing, and the composition matters a lot. And I think the country is looking forward to these kinds of visitors. They come in, the Europeans come in, they stay longer, they spend more money. The Americans do as well. But the more the visitors come in, the better it helps the economy. And you might have noticed the yen is still flirting around 160. Last week at this time, the yen was 159.24. And this week, the yen closed out on Friday at 159.5. So it's moved up, but you would have thought with everything that happened over this last week that the yen would have eclipsed 160. And when it becomes 160, the government becomes worried, the prime minister gets worried, the Bank of Japan, they start talking about interest rates and about, intervention, yen intervention. That doesn't look to be the conversation right now. So obviously there's a lot of energy being devoted to keeping the yen tapped down below 160. There have been some good news. The inflation rate actually has eclipsed, actually in a good way, the projections of the Bank of Japan. So this is the first time in 3 years that the inflation has dipped below what the Bank of Japan said it would be. And that's because you might remember Ms. Takeuchi became prime minister, and then they had a supplemental budget, and it was the largest supplemental budget. The impacts of the supplemental budget have been spilling out in February and March. And as a consequence of that, utility prices are receiving subsidies. And so that's tapping it down. And so when energy costs go down, it impacts everything. It impacts food, it impacts services, it impacts heat and light, that sort of thing. So these underlying pressures, they've eased, but they're not disappearing. They're temporarily suppressing the utility costs, but inflation has been managed but not completely solved. And this creates a tension. A weaker yen pushes inflation up, and the government policy is pushing it down. And the Bank of Japan is caught in between with former Governor Kuroda. He was his term of office, 2 terms, 5 years each. I think he was in the office for 10 years. And he's now on the speaking tour talking about Takeuchi is not doing such a great job on the economy. He's openly arguing for higher rates and warning that fiscal policy is part of the problem. So watch this triangle closely, the yen, energy, and policy, and that's where the next move comes from. And on the security front, there are several signals that are worth noting. North Korea, as I mentioned earlier, has rejected overtures for a dialogue with Kim Jong-un, doubling down on nuclear posture and explicitly labeling South Korea as the primary enemy. This rhetoric matters, not because it is new, but because it is being amplified at a moment of broader instability. So closer to home, an extraordinary incident happened on Tuesday. A 23-year-old South Defense Forces officer broke into the Chinese embassy compound in Tokyo carrying a knife. The Chinese embassy, it's not, I mean, I think most people know where it is. It's very close to Roppongi Hills. It's down the street towards Arisugawa Park, right across the street from Adam and Eve, a famous sauna that is frequented by a certain class of Japanese citizens. A very interesting place. But that's where the embassy is. It's filled with cops. It's got security, Japanese security, and also the Chinese security as well. But this guy climbed over the fence, got into the compound with a knife. He was going to do some damage. He was insisting on meeting with the ambassador. He was captured and turned over to police. The Japanese have apologized for that profusely and told the Chinese that there's going to be an investigation. But of course, this was not enough. The Chinese want far more scrutiny on this incident than that. But I mean, what an amazing thing for an officer to take it into his own hands. And he's mad that the comments coming out of China about the prime minister, that she shouldn't have said what she said about, you know, and should China become an existential threat, it will participate in the defense of Taiwan. This was a comment that was made about 3 months ago. So there's a lot of heightened tensions there, and it's not coming at a good time. And of course, it was a conversation piece between the prime minister and the president not 1 week ago. So it's just one of those things that we just need to keep an eye on. I don't think it's going to die down. It is a rather startling thing to happen, but let's see how that kind of rolls out. And at the same time, nuclear power has now gone online. The Niigata reactor has come on backline, I think on Thursday of this week, feeding Tokyo's energy needs. And this is a quiet but important step towards energy security over ideology. And that ideology is, you know, save the climate, you know, don't burn coal, you know, and the Japanese are, you know, back heavy burning coal, because that's, you know, the energy is far more important than, you know, saving, you know, the planet when push comes to shove. And that's a decision that you can see reflected. The energy is going back on with nuclear, and I think you're going to see much more of that. But the Niigata reactor is the first one to go on. There are several others that are in the process. And at the same time, the prime minister, as part of her job, she has to meet diplomats that are coming in. They've always been coming in. We had the premier from Canada that came in 2 weeks ago. Didn't cause much of a flash in the pan, but there was a lot going on then. Now we have the end of the fiscal year on March 31st, but we've got 2 premiers coming in. We've got the President Macron from France. I think he will be here this week, and then Indonesia's president as well, all at the same time. So it never stops. And as much as she's fighting alligators, she's still got to, put on a pretty face and, do the diplomatic thing as well. But I think Japan is standing in a in a key position and is reflecting itself well. I think there's a lot to be hopeful for as Japan moves forward. After the budget is passed, you're going to see a lot of legislative changes going forward. And in light of all of that, the Hormuz situation, it just continues to hang over everything. And as everybody knows, 90% of Japan's energy comes, or the oil at least, and LNG comes through that corridor. And yet the opinions remain limited. The options remain limited for Takeuchi to really clearly project to Washington, D.C. that we are with you. We are, we're not defending the straits. You are, but we're getting the benefit from that. Japan cannot engage militarily. So that position has been accepted. She's explained that to the Diet on Wednesday. She was front and center taking the hits and explaining that. But it kind of defines the boundary of what Japan can and cannot do. But I do think that you can expect something demonstrative happening over the next week with regard to Japan supplying some sort of defense supplement or support in the Hormuz. I think it's just unavoidable. So finally, you might remember Om Shinrikyo, which is the sarin gas attack. That happened in 1995 on March 20th. It happened at 8 o'clock in the morning, right below Kasumigaseki, right below where all of the train lines come in. And that anniversary was just this last week. We have a similar, not quite similar, but the Unification Church is somewhat similar to Om Shinrikyo. It's a kind of a religious organization, and it is now being dismembered and assets being distributed to the people who joined the Unification Church, committed their money, they gave their assets to the Unification Church to guarantee their success in the afterlife or whatever the storyline was. That was found to be criminal in intent, and now the Unification Church is being dismembered. The reason why I mention that now is because also within the parliament and within the prime minister's office, they're discussing a new form of an investigative authority like anti-spy or something similar to the CIA or the FBI, something like that, to really hone down on crime and organized crime, that sort of thing. And that is an issue that will be legislatively examined this session. Once the budget is passed, I mean, it's being discussed now, but I think you're going to see some movement moving in that direction too. As we know, on the broad spectrum, political spectrum, the prime minister is not on the left. She is further on the right. She's not far on the right, but she's over in this area, and many people in the cabinet are supporting her. So you can see that there is an incremental step moving towards Japan being a little bit more robust on a lot of issues, not just the constitutional issues, but also military, economic policy, and the way that foreigners are being treated and accepted into Japan. So there's a lot of undercurrent going on there. I'm going to continue to watch that, reporting to you. I really appreciate you signing in every week to participate, and that leaves us with the prime minister returning from Washington with tangible deliverables, but facing friction at home. And the budget will pass, but not very cleanly. And the current pressure now is the energy markets. They remain a bit unstable, but I think things will settle down over the next month or so. But there are 4 things that you should watch. Watch the yen, watch oil prices, watch what happens on April 11th. That's when the Constitution demands that the law, the budget passed by the lower house becomes law, and how the upper house chooses to posture in the days ahead. So with that, let me turn it over to you, Maya. Let's get into the Q&A so I can get back onto the water.
Right, I know that you cannot wait to do that. And still, once again, thank you, Timothy. To everybody watching us, please let us know that you have watched the briefing by hitting like, subscribe, or sharing. if you share, we'll be very grateful because, of course, you will help us spread the word of this briefing, the series as well. So thank you very much in advance for doing that. And before we move into the Q&A session, once again, I wanted to tell you that there is a synopsis for each one of these briefings. It goes out a couple of days after the briefing is over. So it is sent via the newsletter of Langley Esquire. And if you haven't subscribed yet, you can do that by finding Langley Esquire on Substack or letting me know, and then I'll add you to the mailing list. Another thing that Timothy mentioned in the beginning, and also I did as well, is the movie night this Tuesday, that is March 31st, and we're going to watch Rento Family of all movies,
Oh,
right?
sounds great.
Yes, sounds great indeed. And it is the movie is screened in Shinjuku, the Piccadilly, Shinjuku Piccadilly, the movie theater there, and it started 7:05. But once again, as I said in the beginning, please watch out on LinkedIn so that you get the details when we gather and where we gather. So it's a movie that I believe many of us can relate to the story and the characters. So with this, I will move to the questions and answers. Again,
Before that, Maya, can I
yes,
add a plug as well? So
please do.
for all of the Japan hands who tune in, you know, it's a rare briefing that we give every Sunday. We brief you on what's going on in Japanese politics, but it's not the only one. Dan Harada also has a briefing monthly. It's a breakfast briefing. It happens on the last Thursday of the first Thursday of every month, and that happens this Thursday. So if this is something that's really up your alley, you want more of it. It just he gives a different bend on it. He has different assets. He's actually a naturalized French citizen. He's been in Japan far longer than I have, and I met him when I was a Diet secretary, 40 years ago. So he's been doing this for a long time, and he gives a breakfast briefing at the Tokyo Hotel, which is right behind the Prime Minister's office. So find Dan on LinkedIn, hurry up and register because it's closing up. And if you want to, just kind of rub shoulders with a lot of other, really embedded Japan hands in the Tokyo community, join us for that breakfast.
Okay, thank you. And now hurry up to leave your comments and questions so that I can feed them to Timothy before he runs away on and then starts sailing back. So thank you very much. I recognize the fact that once again we have the very first questions this morning from Byron, but I want to start with something very domestic. And
Okay.
yes, and it comes from Mario. So, Mario, thank you so very much for watching, for tuning in, and for the questions as well. So, Mario writes from April 1st, significantly stricter rules will apply to naturalization
That's
in
right.
Japan. At the same time, there are rumors that dual citizenship may be legalized to address the roughly 1 million Japanese who are believed to hold two nationalities in a legal gray area. Do you have any insight into this, Timothy? And what
So
are your thoughts?
Uh, thanks, Mario. It's been a while since you've lobbed in a question, so I appreciate it. And thanks for joining us. So April 1st is the start of the fiscal year. That starts, it's the start date for a lot of things that happens. Dual custody for children in the event of divorce. The bicycle, the blue laws, the blue ticket laws start on April 1st. So if you're riding around holding your cell phone in one hand and an umbrella in the other hand and you're pedaling down the street, you'll get ticketed. And the ticket means that you're going to get fined. So it was a little bit lax. That's going to happen. The law on naturalization, yes, April 1st, that's already been set as the law was established. The upper house and the lower house talked about that and actually passed it into law. That starts on Wednesday, actually. So you're going to be able to see a lot of things that happen in kind of an orchestrated manner. The details about dual citizenship, I think I don't know how many actually, of a dual marriage. That means a Japanese national and a foreign national. I don't know how many children that have been born that have dual citizenship here, but you're supposed to give it up when you turn 20 years old. And I think what they're considering now, as Mario has pointed out, is that for a brief period of time, they'll be able to manage that or keep dual citizenship. A lot of other countries acknowledge dual citizenship. Japan doesn't, but in fact, it doesn't do anything about it. I've got 4 kids who have dual citizenship. They travel on the passport that they feel like using, either going out or coming in. Nobody says anything one way or the other. So I think that's going to be changed. It's funny, Japan is really particular and meticulous about some things, but other things it's just kind of lackadaisical about. And I think now with the new prime minister and the minister for dealing with harmonious relations with foreign countries and foreigners in general, it's now a cabinet seat, a cabinet position, that you're going to see a little bit more emphasis on that. It's funny too, because Japan needs workers, and it shouldn't be dissuading people who want to come here and work, make a living, and contribute to the Japanese economy by putting up different barriers. But Japan's a funny country for a lot of different reasons too, so don't want to single that out.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. And well, moving on to domestic issues once again. This time they are basically about the budget before I move a little bit to external problems, let's say. Here we've got a question from Manabe-san saying, provisional budget will overcome the deadline. So basically, the budget, the passing of the budget will not be
No
done
harm, no
before.
foul. Right.
Right. But what is the red line for the currency? So basically, I believe that what Manabe-san wants to know is what is the red line for intervention by the Bank of
So,
Japan?
so we don't know. All we can guess is that in the past, when it exceeds 160 yen to the dollar, people start getting very nervous, because now you're paying more in Japanese yen to get the same thing in US dollars. And in order to tap that down, intervention by the Bank of Japan and the Ministry of Finance generally occurs. And when they intervene, it's a huge intervention. I mean, to move the yen, it costs an enormous amount of money. Japan holds a lot of money. It holds it in reserve. The foreign currency reserves that it holds are enormous. It far eclipses their debt. You know, their debt to GDP is what, 256 times, but they hold that in assets in any event. So there's a lot that they can do to tap it down. It's just it's not just a political move. It is frowned upon by trading partners that they're artificially supporting the yen, and that's true. But then again, other countries do that too. But specifically to answer Manabe-san's question, it seemed to be the 160. I remember it being triggered at 162, maybe 2 years ago, when the Japanese came in really ferociously. In the span of maybe 3 days, they came in with one tranche, and then they came in with a second tranche 2 or 3 days later, and it really pushed the yen back down to 154 area, and it stayed there for about 6 months before it began to creep up again. So once again, I went a little bit long-winded. I apologize, but I think that's the trigger that you have to watch out for.
Okay, thank you for that. And now Byron's questions, there are two of them. The first one is about the Strait of Hormuz and Japan. So, if the Strait of Hormuz crisis drags on, to what extent can Japan reduce dependence on oil and gas by nuclear power and hydrogen?
Oh, well, they can. I mean, nuclear power and hydrogen, the energy mix here is I think 8%.
Mm-hmm.
It's not huge. It used to be maybe 20%. You
Yes,
can fact check me, Maya.
it was close to 20%, and they had set a target of making the nuclear, specifically the nuclear power, up to 30% of the energy mix. But then, well, March
Then
11
the triple
happened.
disaster. That's right.
Yeah, happened, and then those plans went downhill.
They
Yeah.
sure did. I mean, all the nuclear plants were shut down. Everybody was shut down. And to supplement what the energy is provided by nuclear, that meant coal and LNG and wind. They brought in a lot of wind and solar panels. But I think that's just a phase. I think Japan is quickly going to get back on track. And that's also one of the reasons why this $550 billion investment in the United States, small modular nuclear power plants, they are so necessary. The amount of energy, and they've talked about it. I mean, Stone, the president of SoftBank, is building a $500 billion plant, I think somewhere in where is it? I'm not sure, but it's a massive project that it just consumes as much energy as is being produced in the United States already. That's the projection of how much energy is being needed to supply for the AI machines and keeping energy going. These things consume an enormous amount of energy. So having these modular nuclear energies to run cities or factories, that sort of thing, is a huge deal. And the amount of money being invested is not just Japanese money, it's US money, but it's also some French and Canadian money as well. So it's a very big deal. But yes, supplementing the energy mix is something Japan is focused on. If they're not getting the oil, and they have 200 days, they have 200 days of supply. They just released the most enormous strategic reserve that they've ever had. They've had the strategic reserve for 25 years, but they've released a huge portion of it just this last Wednesday, and it's hitting the markets. Several of the tankers that were destined for Tokyo are now en route. They will be hitting. So Japan, I think the Hormuz Strait situation is going to be resolved sooner rather than later, and this conversation will die down pretty quickly.
Right, and along these lines, here we've got a viewer on YouTube. His handle name is Bobbins the Third, and he says, "I heard there was gas rationing in South Korea. That won't be great for confidence in the South Korean market and the international markets. Obviously, confidence in South Korea." Yeah. So thank you for commenting on this. Yes.
Bilbo, I'm not too aware of what's going on in South Korea with the rationing, but I know the Philippines is in a panic. The Philippines has like 45 days of reserves. I mean, they have basically no strategic reserves at all. They're in a panic. They've declared an emergency already. So that's the Philippines. The Philippines is vastly different from South Korea, but I wasn't aware that South Korea was also experiencing that kind of an emergency issue.
Indeed. All right. Thank you for this. And the second question, again from Byron, is historically, Japan maintained good relations with most of the oil and gas producers, including Iran. What changed in recent times?
So this is from Byron.
Yes.
Yeah, another great observation. So it used to be that Iran and Japan were relatively close, and Japan extended a lot of effort to keep and maintain that relationship. But under the United States and the sanctions, it had to also participate in the sanctions. So as a result, the relationship between Iran and the and Japan actually atrophied. The relationships, the connections between the foreign ministry and some of the diplomats in Iran, and plus Iran was going through its own turmoil as well, being accused of sponsoring terrorism all over the Middle East and in different places throughout the world. With Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen and just all sorts of things. So it was encouraged to distance itself and also participate in the sanctions. So that means that Toyota trucks and cars and investments are no longer going to Iran. So this idea that was brought forward by the Iran's foreign minister that Japan will let your ships go through. We don't have a beef with you. You guys are good guys. We like you. We've had a good relationship. We'll let your ships go through. And that was kindly acknowledged but not accepted. That was right in the heat of battle, actually. And I think although that offer still might be outstanding, whether it can be actually performed upon by the Iranians is an open question. And I think before the foreign ministry comes to a decision on that, I think Hormuz will be a solved issue.
Well, I think that most of the people really hope that it will be, and as soon as possible, because it
Yeah.
can never come too soon, right?
No, there's
And
too much reliant on it.
indeed. All right, and we've got also a comment from Percival who says Japan has great opportunity to sell nuclear energy for the new AI data centers.
Yeah.
I hope they don't lose that chance as we lost it with the Shinkansen technologies.
Yeah, I could. This is who? This is Percival.
Percival, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks for continuing to lob in your thoughts and your questions. Yeah, Japan kind of lost out with the Shinkansen because it's over manufactured, it's over technology. The Chinese come in with something that's not as great, gets the business done, and they're selling more of their rapid transit systems than the Japanese are. But it's like the tankers. The tankers that are built by Japan are are world class. Everybody wants them, but nobody can afford them. But they do the job, and the minesweepers as well. Also, as you mentioned, the Shinkansen. It's interesting. Did you know that they also have a line going from northern Japan to Tokyo that is not designed for people, but it's only designed for cargo? Cargo on the Shinkansen, it's going Monday through Fridays in the evening hours at night, supplying cargo. And I thought that's just something that's just recently been announced. So yes, Japan is magnifying and elevating that. And also we've got the maglev that is starting to come online. Some of the cities, Nagoya, in fact, is having a little bit of trouble. They're preparing for the passage of maglev through their district, but the population is declining. It's not at the state that it was projected to be when the maglev came online, when they first designed this thing 20 years ago. And so there's a lot of consternation. How much money is being spent for the design and for the department stores and all of the hub that the maglev station is going to engender? And the population decline just tells them it's not going to pay for itself. So they're really stuck in between a rock and a hard place. I'm sorry, I went a little bit offline.
No, that's fine because we often also hear people here saying that the Japanese infrastructure is overdeveloped, especially in
Yeah,
regions that are not so densely populated. But, well, maybe that's true, but at the same time, I wonder whether it is an entirely bad thing, right? Because the country is navigable, let's say navigable, regardless of how many people live in the local regions. So, well, obviously, there are some benefits and advantages to that as well. All right.
what would be so magnificent would be if Japan came up with some kind of advanced technology for modular nuclear energy in a small package, or maybe in a package that you can kind of modulate depending on what your needs are, and sell those like hotcakes, like they do Toyota and Honda cars throughout the world. I think that would be just fantastic. But the way it's designed now, whatever product that emerges, it's not just Japan solely. It's going to be a 2 or 3 country effort, and so the technology will be distributed proportionately. But I think you can anticipate some really great things coming out of the push of all of these investments pouring into a single location, which is the United States, and forcing these countries to collaborate and to cooperate to generate revenue that they'll share in, but they're not guaranteed, right? Unless there's a success, you're not going to get any of that. So it's a very clever move. I just hope it works.
Yes, indeed. All right, thank you for this. And going back again to the permanent residency, Hiroko-san has some very good comments here. Thank you very much for this, Hiroko-san. She says also permanent. She talks about permanent residency and naturalization in Japan. She says it is extremely hard to become a Japanese citizen, earn Japanese nationality, but if you fulfill the requirements and if dual citizenship is legalized, it gives long-term residents the opportunity to finally fully integrate into the Japanese society. And long-term residents here means obviously people who have lived here for over 25 years. All
Yeah.
right. So, and without giving up their roots where they were born into by giving up their original citizenship. So, and she continues, I'm following this issue closely. And then it depends on what kind of requirements are to be fulfilled. So, yes, we'll see. And also, Hiroko-san once again comments about South Korea and the situation with the gas energy resources there. She says South Korea is considering purchasing oil from Russia. South Korea is not a member of G7. Do you think it would create some friction among the democratic nations? Timothy.
Absolutely. But the Europeans have been doing that the entire time that they've been, supplementing the Ukrainian war too. So it's a little bit screwy. If I think maybe the time has come for Russia to, I don't know, it's a kind of a little bit out of my area of expertise, but I do sense that there's a tectonic shift going on. This oil from Hormuz to China being controlled by the United States is a huge lever that the United States could exercise long term. You remember that the trip that President Trump announced that he was going to have to China has been postponed. And I don't ever remember China saying, yes, you are formally invited in the last week of March or the first week of April. I don't remember that, although the president said he was going. Maybe that was withdrawn, maybe for other reasons. It was not well established, but it now looks like it'll be in a month and a half or so, and a lot can happen there. But this leverage that the United States has, depending on how the Hormuz situation works out, it could change that dynamic. And we've also got, this ongoing thing with Ukraine. Should that be resolved too, and Russia, the sanctions for Russia, are removed, yeah, that would be a wonderful thing. If that can be achieved, then South Korea can buy their oil from Russia, and nobody's going to be that much more upset about it. But yeah, energy is the biggest issue confronting the world right now.
Yes, because the European Union has also now declared that they're not going to ban petrol what imports from Russia as they intended to do in 2027, right?
Yeah,
Obviously, yes, the situation there, the global dynamics does
yeah,
not allow a total ban on those imports. And then once again, are we talking about ideology or are we talking about economy? I think
that's right.
we that's what the question comes down to, right? Okay,
Can
and then
can
we.
I can
Oh
I go
yes,
back
please.
before we move on?
Yes,
Hiroko-san mentioned about immigration and naturalization, that sort of thing. There was
yes.
a controversy that was raised just this last week that's somewhat telling. So the Muslim community has requested a site for graves for burial of Muslims, and that was denied. And the Muslim community took it up with some of the ambassadors. They went to the uh, the cabinet official to complain about that, and their request was denied. And they said, if Muslims die in Japan, they should go back to where they came from to be buried there. That's distinctly different than how it's handled with other religions. You still have to incinerate the body under Japanese law. You still have to do certain things, but the request of the Muslims. So it tells you that we're watching what's going on in Italy and in France and in Europe and Scandinavia. We don't want that here. And if you're going to be here, you're going to live here as a permanent resident, and you're going to create your communities. We're having second thoughts about that. So you can see that happening in real time. I just wanted to mention that in passing because it is interesting that the Japanese government is carefully evaluating and making decisions that some people would say, that's not very woke of you to be denying, religious freedom to these people who have come and selected Japan as their home country.
Well, once again, the question is whether it is a religious freedom at stake or just some rights of that religion, right, that have not been accepted by the host nation.
Right.
And so
And there
I
are Japanese citizens who are Muslims too. It's not just Muslims who come from the Middle East or from maybe
Indeed.
Indonesia, for example. But they're Japanese citizens that are Muslims. So I think this denial of the request for a Muslim cemetery, yeah, it's somewhat telling.
Right. Okay. Thank you for this. And we've got actually somebody who is working in the area of small modular reactors. So Kira Takuhiro is one of our viewers, and he says, "This is my modular
Excellent.
nuclear reactors is my specialty, and it would be wonderful if Korea and Japan partnered on commercial nuclear energy plant deployment. Please remember that pre-March 11, Japan constructed 54 nuclear power plants. After March 11, that is the triple disaster, there's only capacity to restart about 20 reactors. Japan is far from fulfilling net zero without nuclear energy." Thank you very much for these comments, yes, Tokuhiro-san. And I believe that this is what it is at the moment, and hopefully, with the change of the tide now, Japan can once again go back to rebuilding or probably
Yeah.
supplementing the nuclear power capacity, because without it, indeed, it's really difficult to maintain not only the industry but also the new industries coming in. Like everybody talks about data centers, and those centers need a lot of energy, something that Japan will have difficulty supplying if there are not, let's say, stable policies about capacity, expanding the capacity here. All right, and also we've got Percival once again saying, "What about the new Japan US oil deal that was announced by Trump last week via Alaska and Hokkaido? Is it feasible, and how long would it take? Only Middle East oil seems easy to refine." So I don't, yeah, this is a very cryptic question, but okay, let's talk about the feasibility of supplying oils via Alaska from the United States.
So I understand that proposal, it probably takes about 7 or 8 years to reach fulfillment. And so it is a conversation. I don't know if it really has long legs, but it's probably um, something that eventually might produce some impact. But there's also the proposal of building a Suez Canal type canal bypassing the Hormuz. But that's a 20-year project. So you never know. I think more likely you've got oil from Venezuela, you've got oil that will eventually flow through the Hormuz. But yeah, oil, pretty much the availability and the price of oil kind of dictates everything. It dictates, the prosperity of the countries and their ability to have an engine of growth and to produce new technologies and just to feed their populations, to create even fertilizer. So that is the crux of the issue. I think it's more immediate than waiting for 8 years for a project to be fulfilled.
Like, do you think that it's feasible to have oil imported from Alaska via Hokkaido from the United States?
Through tankers,
I have no idea. Maybe through tankers, or maybe a gas pipe project.
I don't think it would be a gas pipe project, but if it's going to be coming from Alaska, there's no need for it to go from Alaska to Hokkaido and then from Hokkaido throughout the rest of Japan. I mean, why not just take it directly from Alaska to the ports of entry? I don't know. I don't understand the Hokkaido
Mm-hmm.
feature
No, it's
of
just
that.
a question. Yes. Okay, and Hiroko-san says the oil from Alaska is for domestic use. They do not have a port to accommodate large tankers, and they need to construct such ports or one port. It will take probably 2 to 3 years. Yes. Hiroko-san, thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Hiroki-san.
Yes, very much appreciated. So, yeah, well, I believe that the soonest resolution will come or should come from resolving the crisis in the Middle East right now, because it was I believe it was an artificially created crisis this time, but let's see what happens indeed. Okay, and with this, it looks like. Okay, so Tokuhiro-san says one has to wonder for any infrastructure project that requires 7 to 8 years that the current US and Japanese senior leadership will not be in the current position.
Yeah,
Well, that's true. But my concern here is not about Japan, the Japanese leadership, because even if they are not in the current position, we still have Kasumi Goseki to to work for the let's say realization of the project, right? I think that things are probably different in the United States, but I'm not specialist there, so maybe somebody who was born and lives there can help us with this.
I think the observation is more about the administration in the United States not being the same administration rather than in Japan, because that only makes sense because in the Biden administration it was, save the planet, let's stop drilling, let's not have energy needs that are met through destroying the planet, let's have wind farms and let's have so this back and forth in the United States is much more volatile than it is in Japan. So I think maybe the question was pointed at that administration rather than the current LDP Takaichi administration.
Could be, yes. I have no way of telling. Okay, and with this, to everybody who commented and shared questions, helped us with information, like Hiroko-san, thank you so very much indeed for this. We appreciate it again. We'll be here next Sunday at 8:20. Yes, I have to switch in my brain, the information there.
and
So,
and
yeah.
Maya, we get together every week, all the Japan hands throughout the world getting together, but we can get together on a movie night too. And I think if it's the movie starts at 7, it gives us time to get together beforehand or maybe afterwards and talk about the movie and just get to know each other a little bit better and talk about issues that concern us. Great idea,
Yes.
by the way.
uh, the movie night, right? Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, let me tell you once again. It is going to be on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday. That's March 31st. And
Piccadilly.
Piccadilly, Shinjuku Piccadilly. The movie is Rental Family, and it starts at 7:05 p.m. So please follow our posts on LinkedIn so that you get details of where we meet at what time. And of course, you can also go directly to the movie theater and we can meet there, but I think it will be more fun to meet before that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you again.
And also for those of you who are looking for more of a social face-to-face opportunity to interact, don't forget Dan Harada's Nagatacho briefing on Thursday morning. It starts at 7. Well, you need to be seated at around 7:30, but his briefing starts at 8 o'clock with a nice breakfast, and you meet a lot of heavy hitters in Tokyo.
Indeed. Well, and with that, I want to wish you a great Sunday. Enjoy the weekend, and also please be with us again next Sunday at 8:20 or later, depending on your schedule, in the morning or the evening before, if you are in the United States or in Europe, probably. Okay, so Timothy, you're free to go. I can see you that how your wings are growing now.
Thank you,
All right.
Maya. You're
Thank
so
you
observant.
very
Congratulations
much.
on your daughter's graduation, by the way.
Thank you very much. She's very
Yeah,
happy,
it's
but
graduation season, isn't it?
it is, yes. But
Yeah.
yeah, more harder times are coming for her.
Yeah, teenage. Lucky you.
Yes. Yes. Okay. See you next week.
Thanks,
Have a
Maya.
great week ahead. Thank you,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.
Bye.